Climate change and infectious diseases, from evidence to a predictive framework. This experiment dives into the question of climate change's effect on infectious diseases, focusing on the effect climate warming has on the pathogens and parasites that enable infectious diseases. Some of the background information covered in the introduction include earlier research and observations that infectious agent life cycles are related to climate. Climate change, and more specifically temperature change, impacts the risk of diseases in humans, plants, and animals. Humans have vaccinations and medications that can hinder the effects of climate or temperature change-related diseases, but plants and animals do not, so the effects of climate or temperature change are shown more than in humans. Parasites are another life system affected by climate change. Using this information, the researchers predicted that pathogens are affected more by temperature change. Because pathogens affect infectious diseases, this would determine if temperature affects the risk of disease. Knowing this would help build the predictive framework these researchers are aiming for.
Ecophysiology of host-pathogen interactions. First, what is a host-pathogen relationship? It's a relationship that explains how pathogens, including microorganisms and viruses, sustain themselves inside of a host organism. Once within a host, pathogens cause disease. An intermediate host is one in which the pathogen spends only part of its life in or does not reach sexual maturity in. A vector is often used to transmit infection from one host to another. Increased temperatures affect these relationships. One effect is that a temperature increase can increase immune enzyme activity and bacterial resistance in some insects, such as crickets. A second effect is that increased temperatures have positive effects on many marine pathogens, such as those in coral, which can lead to higher metabolic rates and fitness in the pathogens and higher disease transmission rates. The way that host-pathogen interactions react to climate change can be predicted using the metabolic theory of ecology. The metabolic theory of ecology affirms that the metabolism of organisms is one of the main controlling factors of ecology. The MTE can predict host pathogen response and infection rates due to increased climate temperatures when it is used to observe how seasonal and annual temperatures affect reproduction of organisms in connection with pathogen development and death.
Shifts in behavior, movement, and phenology of hosts and parasites. Phenology is the study of the timing of biological events in relation to climate or seasonal changes. For example, in the spring, scientists would be interested in studying a plant that is flowering and the biological cycle that causes this to occur. Changes in climate are affecting the phenology of different species, which is causing a change in their migration. Species are now moving towards higher elevations or latitudes. Climate change is affecting pathogenic life cycles too. Having milder winters doesn't kill off all migrated host populations. These warmer winters are allowing these viruses to live year-round. They are not being killed off in the winter when they are supposed to. Climate change is also affecting pathogenic development. Some parasites are experiencing earlier hatching and exposure to hosts earlier in the season. Parasites are becoming more used to the changing climate. Climate change could ultimately speed up parasite response when dealing with the changing climate. Consequences for conservation and human health. Wildlife diseases has a huge impact on humans. It greatly affects those who depend on wildlife to survive. Many people depend on wildlife for food, materials, and cultural activities. If there was a change in wildlife, it would compromise the livelihood and health of people that rely on the wildlife to survive. For societal implications, it is important to use climate change projections to learn and analyze how pathogens could respond to climate change. Experiments and test models can be used to test predictions under realistic conditions. This will then help us better prepare to understand how pathogens will respond to climate change.
Outlook and future challenges. The mechanistic models and drivers included mean temperature and temperature change. The researchers suggested that future work should focus on the effects of precipitation, relative humidity, and extreme events. They also emphasize the importance of using models that determine how different pathogen types are affected by climate change. When climate change increases the risk of disease, this also affects human health, food supply, and wildlife conservation. Under the topic of human health, future research could focus on the effect that climate change and disease risk would have on human societies. It is also noted that it was challenging and will continue to be a future challenge to detect disease risk in different systems, such as mobile populations that must be studied over long periods of time. Climate-disease interactions and the implications that were just stated decrease the food yield and risk the availability and cleanliness of water. For the future, the researchers suggested that a study investigates host pathogen evolution as a result of climate change, as this would affect other aspects of climate change. Ultimately, the researchers concluded that climate change does affect pathogens' effect on infectious diseases. Ongoing research will be needed in order to finish building the predictive framework that public health and pathogen detection programs can use as tools to prepare them for the risk of disease.